one of the ways that I think I'm thinking that we can mitigate this question of violence is to make religious literacy in Islam a little bit more complicated and a little bit more dense. I know that's not what many people want to hear. People want to hear a very simple understanding. Islam is simple. You know, deen is easy. And so people want easy fixes. I'm sorry, I'm bringing very bad news. There are no easy fixes. It's a much more difficult process. I want to basically concentrate on two things. One is, I want to start from a story of Rumi. So I'm not going to quote to you verses of the Quran, not yet, maybe later on. But I think one of the things that we need to get used to is to understand narrative. Understand narrative. Why is Rumi so influential? Rumi is influential because Rumi speaks through parable, through metaphor. And people were smart enough to understand what Rumi was saying. Today we have to write commentary after commentary to make people understand what Rumi means by a snake or by emeralds or whenever he uses terminology. That means that we have become illiterate about our own traditions. We don't understand our traditions anymore. A couple of months ago, I was at a very important kind of close working group talking about the future of Islamic reform. And one of the colleagues presented a paper using an idea of Rumi to begin to think about how Rumi thinks about self and other. You know, all morning we've been talking about the other, you know, Christians, Hindus, Buddhas, how do we relate to that? And how Rumi struggles between self and other. And the immediate response from a couple of professors around that was, how can you quote Rumi? Rumi's a poet. Poets are always doing extreme and ecstatic things. This is not really thought. And with a very quick way, they could dismiss the contribution of Rumi. Okay? Because people have been trained to think that only using Quranic verses and hadith can give you authoritative speech. They don't understand that Rumi captured the imagination of vast amounts of Muslim Orthodox scholars who understood Persian. And he captured the imagination because Rumi translated the meanings and messages of the Quran and the prophetic tradition into his poetry. Therefore, the Mathnawi is called the Quran in Persian, because the messages of the Quran is there. Now, most people today will say, oh my God, how can you even say the Quran in Persian? The Quran is only in the Arabic. But this is how Muslims thought before. And so if you are surprised, it's because you're surprised at your own ignorance. We are surprised at our own ignorance, therefore these things come to us as strange and foreign. And therefore there's a very interesting report of the Prophet that he said, Bada al-Islamu ghariba wa sayaudu ghariba fatuba lil ghuraba. That Islam came as a stranger, a voice in the wilderness. It came with a new proclamation where everybody were ignorant about these proclamations. And it will become again estranged to the world. But good news to the strangers. So in every era of crisis, at every moment in crisis, you're going to find people that are going to come with unpopular messages and correctives. And those are the strangers that you must give hospitality to. And you need to listen to what they are saying. And they're going to speak sense. And so, when you read someone like Al-Mawardi wrote on Islamic law, but he's also well known for writing about political thought. But Mawardi has a very interesting book called Adabud Dunya wa Deen, on the etiquette of how to live in the world and how to deal with questions of deen, that is, the etiquette of deen. The same thing that Ghazali later on talked about, the adab in Ihya Ulumuddin was all about the adab of that and the adab of this. So Ghazali elucidated on the etiquette and the ethics of all the practices. But before Ghazali, there was Mawardi in the 11th century. And Mawardi writes in his Adabud Dunya wa Deen, And this is what he says. In this book he says, أجمع فيه بين تحقيق الفقهاء وترقيق الأدباء والبلغاء. That I will combine in this book the verities of the jurists, but also the subtleties of the shu'ara, the poets, and the rhetoricians. If only I remembered this line of Mawardi, I could have shut up that professor at that conference who said, how can you quote Rumi? I should have told him, would have told him that you should have learned that you didn't do your homework properly, you did not remember what Mawardi says. Mawardi says when he writes about adab, he takes seriously not only the fuqaha, the jurists, but also the insights of the rhetoricians and the poets. Because poets also have access to the truth. They tell us the truth in different ways. And so what it is that we need to make sure that the Islamic literacy is a broad gauge literacy. So what I'm calling for, the antidote, the immunization process that we are talking about is not a quick fix. It means that you may have to make investments now that you will see the harvest in 100 years' time. You need to make investments now in the learning circles that Prof. Alatas talked about, study circles that you need to create, and learning groups, and you have to have public fora like these where people are educated and learning the skills. Oftentimes, people want to go and learn Quranic verses and hadith. I'm not saying that is bad, but you need to understand that that Quranic verse has a huge archive of learning that you need to understand how that verse was understood over time. And that you also have the right to understand materials today in the same way that people in the past had the right to understand. Part of the problem on the crisis of the modern Muslim is that the modern Muslim thinks that authenticity only belongs to the past. Only when you have yellow pages is that authenticity, that is the old books. And only if you can quote an Arabic sounding authority like Mawardi or Ghazali is that authenticity. Unfortunately, I'm playing the same game by quoting to Al-Mawardi and what's but you know, how can you teach an old dog new tricks? I half repented. But I'm talking about the intellectual project, and obviously Muslims like to see continuity. So I'm consistent with continuity of the tradition, and that we learn from the past, but the past is not authoritarian. The past is instructive. And what we need to do is to understand the intelligibility of the past. And some parts of the past will become unintelligible. There are lots of things about the past that is unintelligible, and we don't have to worry about that. But we also want to have that part of the past that is intelligible. So this is the thing that many of us have not learnt yet, that while the Prophet said, خَيْرُ الْقُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ ثُمَّ الَّذِينَ يَلُونَهُمْ, that the best of communities is my community, and then the next generation and next generation in terms of the virtues, and that they were part of the prophetic light and the prophetic community, that the Prophet did hail the earliest community as the important one. But people forget. And I know over lunch, Professor Duderija and Professor Alatas had the whole thing about conversation about the companions and the status of the companions, and that some schools of thought believe that the companions are complete paragons, that you cannot engage in any kind of critique of the companions. That's where the Sunni Shia tradition have slightly different position. That for in the Shia tradition, some companions are more virtuous than others, and so on. But anyway, what most of us forget is the Prophet also said the following. Once he was sitting with the companions and he said, I wish I could be وَدَدْتُ أَنْ أَكُونَ مَعِي إِخْوَانِي. I wish I could be with my brothers. And the companion said, are we not your brothers? He said, no. لَا أَنْتُمْ أَصْحَابِي. You are my companions. My brothers are those who will follow me without seeing me. الَّذِينَ يُؤْمِنُونَ بِي وَلَمْ يَرَوْنِي. Those who will believe in me and follow me without seeing me. So the Prophet then had a wish that he will be with the future generations. And he called them his fellow brethren. And I guess if the Prophet was today, he would have included the sisters with his brothers and sisters. So we can do the kind of adaptation that the Prophet would have included, because the Quran did talk about mu'minun and mu'minat, believing men and believing women. So we can make this. But the dominant ethos in that time was to, when they used ikhwani, they mean men and women. Of course. And so people don't understand that the Prophet put a trust in the future generation. So it's not that all the authenticity lies with the past, but a lot of optimism and hope is put on the future. Another thing that the Prophet said, he said that مثل أمتي كالمطر لا يدرى خيرها أولها خير أم آخره. That the parable of my community, my ummah, there's going to be a conference on the ummah by Nottingham University. If I was there, I would have started off with this, that my community, my ummah, is like the parable of rain, a rain shower. You don't know whether the best part of the rain shower is in the beginning or at the end. How? You don't know whether the best part of the rain shower is when it begins or when it ends. Because if it doesn't end, you're going to have a flood. If it doesn't happen, you're going to have drought. Right? So the Prophet is saying that the ummah is not only the good guys at the beginning, but also the great people that come later on. So Muslims must start believing in themselves. You must have trust in yourself that you can be as authentic and as part of the ummah as the people in the beginning were. Because if the people in the beginning are going to do all the work, then you are going to be on holiday. And it doesn't mean that you have to be on holiday, or it means that you are going to make no contribution. So it means that you have to take your responsibility seriously